Today, we are tackling what is, I think, maybe the most universal and frustrating enemy of getting anything done.
The unproductive day.
The unproductive day. You know the feeling. It's not really burnout, and it's not just exhaustion. It's that specific state where the engine just will not turn over.
Oh, that day. It happens to literally everyone. It doesn't matter what your job is. You sit down at your desk, the energy is at zero, motivation just vanished somewhere between breakfast and, opening your laptop.
And what does your brain default to?
Procrastination, sure. But often it's something I think is actually more dangerous. It's that hyper-detailed busy work.
Yes, the frantic optimization.
The frantic optimization of file names, the obsessive rewriting of like one sentence on your website.
Or creating a spreadsheet to manage the spreadsheets you already have. I've been there.
I have definitely been there. It feels like you're working, but it produces zero actual forward-moving outcome.
We called these the high-friction days, and that internal struggle is just immense. And the traditional advice you always hear is, wait it out or find some inspiration, go for a walk and recharge.
But waiting is a luxury. For most people who are building things, founders, creators, leaders, you just can't afford it. Time is the one resource you can't get back.
Exactly. So our mission today is very specific. We are explicitly not looking for inspiration.
No. We are throwing out the entire concept of feeling motivated.
Right. We are looking for systems.
Yeah.
And processes.
Concrete, external, almost mechanical actions that force measurable output, that force forward motion, precisely when your internal mood has just spectacularly failed.
And for this, we have compiled a really fascinating and sometimes, pretty counterintuitive stack of sources for you.
Yeah, we've been diving into some amazing stories, high-stakes decisions from a fast food pioneer, the infrastructure panic at an early social network,
the really rigid writing routines of literary giants like Maya Angelou and Anthony Trollope, and then the scrappy, low-resource tactics of modern design and e-commerce startups.
It's a surprising mix, right? I mean, what does Colonel Sanders have to teach us about modern productivity? But they all kind of converge on this one fundamental idea.
And this is the core shift that we think you need to internalize.
Stop waiting for that internal permission, that little burst of motivation, and start focusing on measurable external motion.
You have to force the work to happen outside the confines of your own head.
That's the key. That's the psychological key right there.
It is. Because unproductive days they're rarely about a lack of ability. They're fundamentally about high internal friction, just the effort it takes to start, and a corresponding low confidence.
You don't trust yourself to do good work. You don't know where to begin, so you don't start at all.
So the aha moment we're really chasing here is realizing that the highest leverage work you can possibly do on your absolute worst day is often the exact work you instinctively try to avoid.
And why? Why do we avoid it? Because that work requires contact with reality. It requires you to be exposed, to be vulnerable.
It risks rejection.
Yes, and we're going to learn how to weaponize that discomfort.
The discomfort of the ask, the discomfort of the routine, the discomfort of rejection. If you can channel it correctly, that discomfort is a surprisingly reliable source of fuel.
So let's start with a foundational story about how necessity can force that uncomfortable action. It really shows what happens when fear and urgency translate directly into outreach.
Okay, let's unpack this with what we're calling the Sanders principle. The power of the external ask.
We tend to mythologize these big creation stories, right? But Harlan Sanders, the Colonel, he didn't start building a multi-billion-dollar empire because he just felt inspired one morning.
No, he did it because he was threatened with total obsolescence, and he had, quite literally, zero other options.
And the specific detail of the crisis here is so important to understanding the system he created. So for years, back in the 30s and 40s, Sanders ran this successful roadside business.
The Sanders Court and Cafe in Corbin, Kentucky.
Right, and people remembered him for his specific fried chicken, cooked really quickly and consistently in a pressure cooker. It was a good, successful regional business.
But then, in the mid-1950s, disaster struck.
Yeah, the source materials all confirmed this devastating constraint. The planned route for the new Interstate 75 highway was announced.
And crucially, it was going to bypass Corbin completely.
The entire ecosystem his business depended on, that constant stream of hungry travelers, was about to just evaporate.
And this wasn't a slow decline. This was like a terminal diagnosis for his way of life.
And you have to remember the context. Sanders was in his mid-60s at this point.
An age when most people are retiring, or at least thinking about it.
Exactly. Instead, his entire business model was just rendered useless almost overnight.
The panic had to be real, but it was anchored in these cold, hard numbers. We have records, including later biographical stuff and a draft manuscript he worked on, where he described assessing his financial runway.
And what was he left with? After selling his properties to pay off his debts, his buffer was literally a single $105 Social Security check.
Wow. Per month.
Per month. That was his entire income and his safety net.
Imagine that pressure. It's not about building a brand at that point.
No, it's about survival.
Yeah.
And that pressure translated his fear and urgency not into, some sophisticated business plan, but into a stark, immediate physical decision to act.
He had to make money faster than that $105 check could be spent.
So what did he do? He sold everything off and he hit the road. He decided to franchise his chicken concept.
But this wasn't modern franchising as we know it. There were no fancy legal documents, no standardized training programs.
No, he was driving around in his old car, often sleeping in the back, and just pulling up to independent, non-chain restaurants.
And this is the part we really need to focus on because it is the core of this principle.
The sheer grinding loneliness and difficulty of the asking.
Yeah, he wasn't handing out some slick brochure. He was walking into a greasy spoon diner, introducing himself, offering to cook his chicken for them.
And then asking the owner to sign a deal. A deal promising to pay him a few cents for every single piece of chicken they sold using his recipe.
Just think about the rejection rate on that. You're this, older guy walking into an established business trying to convince an owner who's probably doing just fine
to change their core product, their fried chicken, for a tiny royalty.
The emotional resilience required for that sheer volume of cold outreach is it's astronomical.
We know his first significant success, the one that provided that early proof, was with a man named Pete Harmon in South Salt Lake, Utah, back in 1952.
But the relentless high-volume asking, that physical act of just driving and pitching, that accelerated dramatically after the highway bypass forced his hand in the mid-50s.
The road trip became the business plan.
Because he had no other choice, he just had to ask.
So the core lesson for us isn't just about, be persistent. The hinge moment wasn't some internal, I believe I can do this, pep talk.
No, it was the decision when he was facing that brutal $105 reality to ignore the discomfort, to ignore the awkwardness, and perform the most exposure-filled action necessary.
The ask.
So let's turn this into a usable principle for that unproductive day.
Okay, so when you feel that low energy, that high friction, your brain instinctively wants a safe, internal, controllable project.
Well, I'm going to perfect the website's footer.
Exactly. But your career or your business, what it actually needs is a conversation. It needs an ask.
You have to internalize this distinction between two types of work. There's internal work and there's external work.
Internal work is the safety zone. It's everything that feels safe because there's no external judgment, no exposure. It's the planning, researching, polishing, tweaking a design.
Creating optimization reports, rewriting the company vision statement for the 5th time.
And it produces no immediate market feedback, so it just feels like you're perpetually preparing.
And then there's external work. This is the exposed work. Outreach, pitching, sales calls, follow-ups, partnership asks, submitting the draft.
Having a hard conversation with a customer, delivering a quote.
This is the work that risks immediate and sometimes painful rejection. But it also creates immediate, measurable feedback and direction.
And it's the work we avoid when our mood is low.
Which is exactly why it is the highest leverage move on your worst days.
When you're feeling depleted, the default habit is to prepare more. I'll just polish this deck one more time before I send it.
I need, just 3 more hours of research before I dare email that expert.
The high leverage move is to force the discomfort, to send one single meaningful message that risks rejection.
Sanders didn't win by having perfect energy every day. He won by keeping the pipeline of potential yeses alive through the sheer volume of his relentless, uncomfortable asks.
Every single meaningful outcome in business, whether it's getting a raise, landing your first client, or launching a product, it requires that awkward first step.
That uncomfortable act is often the only door that opens when you're tired, or you're late, or you're just thoroughly discouraged because it forces reality into your bubble.
Okay, so if we accept that, we need some concrete tactics. How do we defeat that mental block? How do we just ignore the mood and get the ask out the door?
You have to combat the fear of rejection head-on by redefining what a win is.
This is so counterintuitive. Instead of setting a success goal like, I will close 2 deals this week,
You set a rejection quota.
it's a beautiful psychological hack.
It is. Because it makes the action, not the outcome, the win condition, for example. My goal this week is to collect 5 no's.
If I get 5 no's, I've succeeded. I have performed the necessary exposed action, and it doesn't matter if I close 0 deals or 10.
And why does this work so well on an unproductive day? It completely separates your identity from the outcome.
Your job, just like Sanders on the road, is simply to send. Their job is to respond.
You're chasing a metric you actually control, the attempt, not one you don't, which is their reply or their decision.
And critically, you have to streamline the action itself. On a low-energy, low-bandwidth day, you can't be negotiating with complexity.
The sources suggest using a very streamlined, almost mechanical 2-sentence ask script.
Okay, sentence 1. Context plus value. Why are you contacting them? And what's the specific thing you offer with a problem you solve? Keep it super brief.
Sentence 2, a clear next step. Could we schedule a 15-minute call this week to discuss X? Or would you like me to send over the draft by Tuesday?
Absolutely no essays, no ambiguity, no hedging.
And finally, you have to track the physical actions, not your unreliable mood. You need a simple, observable tally. Ask sent today.
That is the only metric that matters for forward motion on a day when you feel like doing nothing.
So when your mind inevitably tries to trick you into spending hours on that safe internal work, you have to force a dedicated, short, maybe 25-minute ask window.
During that window, you only do outreach or follow-ups. No research, no tweaking, just sending the raw message.
The maxim here is, when you can't be brilliant, be bold enough to risk rejection and ask.
That sets us up perfectly for the next step, because once you start getting those difficult, uncomfortable asks out, and you start getting some traction,
you inevitably run into infrastructure problems.
you have to make sure the foundation doesn't quietly crumble underneath you while you're out there focused on the glamour of pitching.
Which brings us to the Henke principle, establishing the non-negotiable baseline.
This story takes us to the high-stakes, fast-growth world of LinkedIn around 2009. The problem they had wasn't a shortage of big ideas or talent.
No, it was a shortage of reliability that had been slowly, dangerously normalized over years of startup growth.
The operational anecdote here is so telling because it shows how quickly a dysfunction can become a ritual.
At LinkedIn, during this rapid growth phase, they had a specific, predictable weekly ritual, the Thursday afternoon outage.
A calendar invite for failure. It's unbelievable. The site would just predictably go dark while the engineers wrestled with code deployments, infrastructure changes, and chasing down the inevitable bugs.
Users would frequently see these error pages, sometimes with their little whimsical Wizard of Inn mascot, trying to make the outage feel friendly.
While the internal teams were just scrambling in panic mode, it was just accepted as a normal part of hypergrowth. A weekly firefight everyone had to go through.
And that normalization is so dangerous. It stops being an issue and it becomes tradition.
This is the environment that David Hank walked into as the new engineering chief. And his first act wasn't to ask about the next big feature rollout or their AI strategy.
No. Accounts from that time suggest his approach was highly confrontational. He reframed the downtime not as technical debt or some unavoidable startup quirk,
but as a severe business risk and, fundamentally, a leadership failure.
He just pointed out the obvious. Every single minute the site was down, they were damaging the one thing a professional network absolutely cannot afford to lose.
Trust and utility.
The stakes were enormous. Recruiters were paying them substantial fees for access to the platform. They were the company's oxygen supply at the time.
So if they couldn't browse job openings or check profiles because the site was flaky or just down, that trust just immediately erodes.
Every error page was a bruise on the business's credibility.
I have to pause here and ask you. Hankey's mandate was simple. Keep the site up, make reliability the feature. But for any leader pushing an engineering team to stop working on the fun, innovative feature work
and start working on the unglamorous, difficult foundation work, the plumbing, that is a huge political challenge.
So how did he successfully get buy-in for that kind of unsexy grind?
That's where the clarity of the constraint was so powerful. He made the objective quantifiable, and he tied it directly to revenue and customer pain.
He didn't ask them to be perfect. He just asked them to achieve one non-negotiable metric: 100% uptime during peak business hours.
By defining that as the primary product, he gave the engineering leads the cover they needed to deprioritize the flashy stuff. He forced the conversation away from ego and towards the oxygen supply.
That makes perfect sense. So the mandate forced the team into what was effectively an emergency, around-the-clock rebuild of the core infrastructure.
It was absolutely unglamorous foundation work, but it was necessary to stop the hemorrhaging of trust and, frankly, of money.
And this is the core principle for us on those low-energy days. When you're having an unproductive day, your instincts lie to you.
They whisper, wait until you feel sharp, or do the fun, new, shiny work.
But success doesn't run on vibes. It runs on reliable baselines.
So the shift for you as an individual is make one thing non-negotiable, and that becomes your site up.
For a global company, it's uptime. For an individual contributor, a founder, an operator, site up means defining the minimum condition that keeps your professional life credible, continuous, and breathing.
So on your worst days, you don't pursue brilliance, you prioritize continuity.
If you're a service provider, that means customer replies are answered within, say, 4 hours and invoices are sent on time. If you're a coder, that means the build stays green. No broken code gets checked in.
If you're a salesperson, the pipeline is touched daily and follow-ups are processed.
Unproductive days invite you to chase novelty, reorganize your tools, rewrite your strategy, research without a goal.
That is an escape hatch from the real work. The antidote, borrowed right from Henke's playbook, is to define the one constraint that, if you neglect it, will silently kill your momentum and you protect that thing fiercely.
You're forcing yourself to do the hard, ugly work aimed at the business's oxygen supply, even if it feels like grinding cement.
The payoff isn't applause. The payoff is quiet compounding. It's trust and structural integrity.
Okay, so let's look at the concrete tactics for system stability. First, you have to name your site-up metric in one crystal-clear sentence. This forces you to be clear.
For instance, my work is up when the support inbox is triaged daily, and all priority 1 tasks are scheduled.
And then, use a red line trigger. Define in advance the condition that forces you to drop all your creative, deep work and just fix the baseline.
Like, if I have more than 5 unanswered client emails older than 24 hours, I stop all feature development until that backlog is cleared.
This prevents that critical foundation from rotting while you're busy building a pretty facade on top.
Which leads directly to the ritualizing of reliability. We suggest a 20 to 40-minute daily stabilized sprint before you start any creative or strategic work.
This block is non-negotiable, and it's reserved only for fixes, administrative bugs, critical follow-ups, and clean handoffs.
You're intentionally separating feature work, the flashy creative stuff, from foundation work, the infrastructure, the admin, the baseline.
On low-energy days, the foundation work gets the first claim on your time. Why? Because it requires less cognitive load than strategic thinking, and it delivers these immediate, measurable, structural wins.
You're defining a minimum standard of performance, and you're treating that standard as the primary product. You do it before anything else, especially if it's ugly.
Because as Henke taught us, a brilliant product that crashes every Thursday is just a beautiful promise, broken repeatedly.
That structural integrity is key. But systems aren't just about protection. They're about the physical commitment of showing up.
So now that we've established that we have to ask externally, like Sanders, and protect our baseline, like Hank, we need a system for the physical act of showing up, regardless of our mood.
This brings us to the Angelou principle, the architecture of attendance.
The story of Maya Angelou writing her seminal autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, it provides the perfect case study of how a rigid external system can be born out of profound emotional necessity and grief.
And the anecdote starts with deep emotional depletion, which is exactly the state we're trying to engineer our work around. This is late 1968.
Following the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., a man she shared a birthday with and had a deep connection to, she fell into a very severe, sustained depression.
She was just paralyzed by grief. The internal motivation well was completely dry.
Her friend, the iconic writer James Baldwin, recognized that the first step to pulling her out was external movement. He essentially forced her to attend a dinner party at the home of the cartoonist Jules Feiffer.
So she's forced into this social setting, and Angelou, who had this magnetic presence, she just started telling stories. And they were compelling and rich and unforgettable.
This external pressure, this forced attendance, it created the initial spark.
Judy Pfeiffer, realizing the potential, called up an editor, Robert Loomis at Random House, and insisted he needed to get Angelou to write a book.
But Angelou initially refused. She saw herself as a poet and a playwright. A memoir felt, I don't know, beneath her or maybe just too painful at the time.
Loomis persisted, but his ultimate success came from this masterful tactical maneuver that only really works on a competitive personality.
He didn't convince her, he challenged her. Angelou had an admitted weakness for a dare.
Loomis eventually said something along the lines of, "It's probably for the best, Maya, because writing an autobiography as literature is simply impossible for anyone."
And that's the psychological ignition point. He flipped the challenge from write a memoir to prove the impossible can be done.
She agreed right then. But as we all know, agreeing is the easy part. The actual work that followed was intensely unromantic and relied purely on a mechanical discipline.
She did not wait for inspiration. She did not wait for emotional recovery. She built an incredibly rigid mechanical system designed entirely to protect the work from her emotional state.
For years, she maintained a spare, drab, distraction-free hotel room, not for sleeping in, but exclusively as a separate workspace.
It was a dedicated place for her writing self, completely disconnected from her domestic life and all its emotional cues. This separation was protective.
And the routine itself was almost monastic.
She would leave her home around 6 in the morning, often heading to a cheap motel, and she would stay until the early afternoon.
And she famously kept the walls blank, asked the staff never to change the sheets. She wanted it sterile, purely functional, and she wrote lying across the bed so consistently, propped up with pillows.
That she described her elbow becoming permanently calloused.
That detail, the calloused elbow, is paramount. It is the literal physical manifestation of attendance.
It embodies that dedication to physical presence and routine, even when the mind was resistant or tired or grieving.
The room wasn't designed for comfort or inspiration. It was designed purely for showing up and minimizing the decision fatigue of starting.
So the principle here is so powerful. Replace mood with a place and time contract.
Unproductive days are primarily defined by that high friction and just too many decisions. Angelou's system removed the daily debate. Do I feel like it? Should I start? Where should I sit?
The system protected a clean start. Leaving home removed all those domestic cues, the dishes, the phone calls, the household admin, the guilt, that quietly recruit your attention when you're emotionally vulnerable or low on energy.
And the blankness and the narrow focus of the room, it just reduced mental tab switching down to a single task. Right.
You don't need to win the whole day. Your only job is to keep the appointment.
The source material shows us unequivocally that consistency and steadiness beat intensity over any meaningful timeline.
You stop negotiating with yourself when you replace the internal question, do I feel ready, with the external question, where's the appointed chair and what time is it?
Okay, so let's discuss tactics for showing up that our listener can use today, because you can replicate this even if you can't afford a hotel room.
Right. Create a defined second place.
Sure.
It could be a specific chair facing a blank wall, a specific table at the back of a library, a cafe corner where you have permission to just ignore the world.
That place must signal work only. It creates a psychological distinction from your relaxation or your administrative space.
And use a blankness kit. On low days, bring only what is needed for today's specific, narrowly defined task.
Your laptop, a charger, one notebook, maybe a single reference manual. The fewer objects you have around you, the fewer escape routes for your attention you permit.
And this one is counterintuitive, but set hard exit time. Setting a boundary makes it infinitely easier to start.
If you know the suffering, the forced attendance ends at 9:00 a.m. sharp, you're much more willing to endure the start at 6:30 a.m.
On low output days, the win is simply attendance. You hit your exit time and you leave, guilt-free.
And this is maybe the most crucial tactical piece for reducing that friction, the breadcrumb strategy.
Angelou reportedly stopped mid-sentence sometimes. If you stop mid-thought or you leave a note that says, next, draft the 3 bullet points on risk assessment for this section.
Tomorrow's ignition cost is 0. You don't start the day deciding, you start the day executing the precise instruction you left for yourself.
Keep the appointment. Your mood can join if it wants to, but the appointment proceeds without it. That's a powerful framework.
But what if the work requires, mechanical, relentless production, not just showing up?
We need a system that translates that physical presence into highly measurable output. This is the Trollope principle, manufacturing momentum with metrics.
Anthony Trollope is the definition of the unromantic genius. In 1850s England, he managed to be one of the most prolific and popular novelists of his time.
All while maintaining an incredibly demanding full-time career at the British Post Office, where he was supervising mail routes across the entire country.
It's a high-demand scenario. He was traveling constantly, dealing with staff, managing logistics, a real exhausting job.
So his second job, his writing, it needed to be reliable, regular, and predictable so he could meet deadlines, get paid, and keep his momentum going, regardless of how tired he was from his day job.
His solution was entirely mathematical. He didn't wait for lightning to strike. He manufactured mechanical urgency.
Every morning, he'd sit at his desk, often starting at 5:30 a.m., with a cup of coffee and a large watch placed directly in front of him.
The watch wasn't decoration, it was his master and his clock.
And here is the highly specific mechanical system he detailed in his autobiography. He committed to producing 250 words every single quarter hour.
Not 249, not 251, exactly 250 words. He wrote that he found the words arrived as regularly as my watch went, basically turning creative output into an accounting task.
This detail is so vital because it meets that flat, gray, low-energy morning with math, not with motivation.
The word count and the clock shrink the commitment unit dramatically. 15 minutes is short enough to be non-threatening.
When you feel unproductive, committing to an hour feels impossible. Committing to 15 minutes feels almost required.
The danger on unproductive days, as we established earlier, is vagueness. Phrases like, I need to make progress on the big project, or I need to advance the manuscript.
They offer no finish line. And that allows the brain to just drift toward distraction that feels productive but accomplishes nothing measurable.
Trollope completely cured vagueness. He wasn't chasing a masterpiece, he was chasing quarters.
He bet entirely on a reliable, repeatable process instead of waiting for a volatile mood. When he hit 250 words, he marked the quarter done and immediately started the next one.
And it didn't matter if the words were good or bad.
It's momentum engineered by the clock, not by feeling heroic. By the time he had to leave for his demanding post office job, he'd already won several small, measurable battles against his own reluctance.
He had proved, in measurable ink, that the day could not label him unproductive.
The deeper principle here is psychological. Tiny completions create frequent wins, which produces evidence, which changes your state midday.
If you wait for a productive day, you're betting on a mood you can't control. If you run the clock and the quota, you're betting on a reliable, repeatable process that you can control.
The focus shifts entirely from feeling capable to merely staying inside a defined, timed container.
Can I just do 15 minutes? Yes. Can I write 250 words? Yes. It simplifies the choice dramatically because the only decision left is obedience to the clock.
So let's look at the tactics for these time sprints that maximize momentum. The core is implementing that quarter-hour sprint. 15 minutes of pure focus, 2 minutes of mandated rest, and repeating that 3 to 6 times.
And you have to adjust the bar for low days. This is where most people fail. They set some ideal quota, they hit resistance, and then they quit.
Trollope's system implies flexibility based on necessity, not mood. So set an embarrassingly doable low quota. 100 words, 5 lines of functional code, drafting 1 crucial paragraph.
The only goal is momentum. You cannot skip the appointment, but you can lower the quality bar to the floor.
And visibility is non-negotiable. Use a physical stopwatch or a highly visible digital timer and keep a visible tally of check marks or word counts.
Your progress has to be seen to be believed. You need to provide cold, hard evidence to your own brain that you are winning the day 1 quarter at a time.
And enforce the one-task rule per sprint, ruthlessly. If you're outlining, you're only outlining. If you're editing, you're only editing. No multitasking.
The goal is depth and focus for 15 minutes, which is all your low-energy brain can spare.
And finally, echoing Angelou's breadcrumb strategy, Trollope's efficiency demands. Start the next sprint ugly.
The moment you finish 250 words, just start the next sprint by writing the first clumsy sentence. You have to reduce that ignition cost by refusing to wait for a clean slate.
Don't wait for a good day. Collect good quarters.
We've covered these internal systems, the appointment, the clock, the baseline. Now let's shift back to external validation.
What if your unproductive day is caused not by exhaustion, but by a paralyzing lack of confidence in the idea itself, the fear that you're building the wrong thing?
We need to talk about chasing evidence and iteration. Let's start with our first external principle, the Swinburne principle. Prove step 1.
This is where we bring in Nick Swinburne, the founder of Zappos, back in 1999. His initial problem was simple, the maddening inefficiency of in-person shoe shopping.
Finding the style but not the size, the inventory scattered across stores, the sheer time wasted. Most people just complain about those frustrations.
Swinburne saw an opportunity.
But the opportunity was also a massive, terrifying risk. At the time, nobody believed people would buy shoes online without trying them on first.
The conventional wisdom was firmly against him, and he didn't have the resources or the conviction to just go build a giant warehouse inventory system and a full e-commerce platform based on a hunch.
And this is where the genius of the concierge test comes in. The brilliant move was to actively avoid the temptation to build the real business first.
He realized that the biggest drag on his confidence wasn't his lack of funding, it was his lack of proof.
So he did the least glamorous, most manual, most inconvenient version possible. He literally walked into shoe stores in his area, San Francisco, and asked for permission to take pictures of their current inventory.
Then he posted those pictures on a basic, simple website. And he made an agreement if a customer bought a shoe online.
He would personally go back to the store, pay full retail price for the shoe, and then mail it to the customer himself.
It wasn't a sustainable business model at all. It was a manual, inconvenient test dressed up as a store.
It was designed to prove one thing and one thing only. Will anyone click the buy button and submit payment for shoes they have never physically touched?
And here's why this is so essential for unproductive days. The moment a couple sales came in, the work shifted.
It became unromantic, running around San Francisco, dealing with traffic, buying shoes, shipping them. But the crucial thing was that the sales, even just a few, immediately reduced that massive anxiety of uncertainty.
That evidence forced the hinge. He didn't need to chase some internal momentum. He needed the external confirmation that the market would lean forward.
The work became manual and inconvenient, but every single sale was a data point confirming the hypothesis.
And, the idea wasn't entirely alien. The sources point out that the anchor for his idea was a 1998 statistic showing that people were already buying shoes from mail-order catalogs.
So the behavior of buying unseen footwear wasn't entirely new. Swinburne just had to prove that the internet could be the new catalog.
The principle here is so powerful. On unproductive days, don't chase momentum, chase evidence.
Your brain wants the clean desk and the perfect 10-step plan, but when you don't have the energy for the full climb, you just take the next stair that reduces uncertainty.
Swinburne didn't wait to be ready. He shrunk the mission down to a step that couldn't lie. Will a stranger pay for this?
He used that manual-first approach so the test could run immediately, with minimal sunk cost. Evidence creates motivation after the fact.
This just flips the standard thinking completely. The default habit is waiting for motivation to build the perfect product, hoping that creates evidence.
The better habit is using a small, controlled, manual action to create evidence, which then provides the necessary fuel, the confidence, to scale the next action.
So let's talk tactics for running a concierge test when your confidence is low. You have to define your step one in one sentence. What must be true for this entire idea to work?
If the answer is a stranger must pay or a client must agree to pilot, then design the absolute minimum manual experiment to test that.
Run the manual first version. If you're selling a complicated software tool, sell it using a shared spreadsheet and email first.
Deliver the output yourself, stitching it together with duct tape behind the scenes. And price it early. Payment is hard evidence. Interest or likes are cheap and unreliable.
Collect one data point per day. That's enough for a low-energy day. One customer reaction, one conversion, one shipped outcome. The goal is to accumulate proof, not output volume.
When your day feels unproductive, don't get inspired, get proof.
But proof, especially in the high-stakes world of fundraising or partnerships, often comes packaged as rejection. And that leads us to our final, separate principle.
The journey of Melanie Perkins, the founder of Canva, provides the definitive blueprint for using rejection as fuel. This is the Perkins principle. Refine the ask.
Perkins started with a very narrow, very clear pain point back in 2007. The maddening complexity of professional design software like Adobe.
She noticed that students and non-designers struggled immensely. Her initial specific wedge into the market was Fusion Books, an online yearbook publishing system.
And that proved the concept. People would pay for simple, template-driven design tools.
But her big vision, Canva, an online tool for anyone, anywhere to design anything, that was much harder to sell.
It sounds so obvious now, given Canva's success, but back then it was futuristic, massive in scope, and investors were deeply skeptical of the technical feasibility and the business model.
She faced what most people would consider catastrophic failure. Over 100 investor rejections.
We are talking about multiple years of hearing no to a vision she knew was possible. That is the very definition of a sustained low-confidence environment.
Most people would have quit long before rejection number 20, let alone number 100. But the story isn't about simply enduring. It's what Perkins and her team did with that rejection that created the system.
They treated every tough question, every skeptical look, every flat-out no, not as a threat to their ego,
but as a design brief for the pitch deck.
They recognized that the rejection wasn't always a no to the idea, but often a no to the way the idea was being presented.
And that's the hinge we're looking for. They systematically separated the outcome from the iteration.
They couldn't force a yes, but they could absolutely force the process of asking to improve. They analyzed every single rejection. What confused them? What did
Yeah.
they doubt? Was it the market size, the technology, or the team?
They learned to change the shape and flow of their pitch deck. Early on, they pitched the product immediately.
But later, after accumulating feedback from dozens of rejections, they learned to lead with the problem, proving the pain exists, proving the stakes are high, and earning the right to show the solution only after the investor understood the magnitude of that pain point.
They were applying rapid design thinking to the entire fundraising process.
So the principle is, separate the outcome from the iteration. When you feel unproductive, when you lack the emotional fuel to face judgment, your job is to protect your trajectory by using feedback, even painful rejection, to upgrade the next attempt.
The loop is attempt, get feedback, refine, next attempt. And that loop is mechanical. It doesn't require a heroic mood or massive motivation.
It just requires a decision to see rejection not as a finish line, but as a mandatory staging area for the next try.
It's a guaranteed path to progress, even when you feel stuck.
So tactically, we need to run a disciplined after-action review on our rejections and failures. Write down 3 specific things. What confused them? What did they ask twice? What was the single weakest link exposed by their skepticism?
Then you enforce the one specific improvement per attempt rule. Don't try to overhaul everything. Just fix the single weakest link that was just exposed.
If they doubted the market size, dedicate the first 3 slides of your next pitch to proving the market size. If they question the feasibility, beef up the technical appendix.
And crucially, build a hard questions appendix or a pre-prepared set of answers. Every tough question you get becomes a prepared, rehearsed answer next time, which reduces your cognitive load and your defensive posture when the pressure's on.
And finally, measure your success by an attempt quota. Just like Sanders on the road. Track how many pitches were sent, how many follow-up calls were made, how many drafts were submitted.
The win is the attempt completed and the feedback collected, regardless of the money raised or the deal closed.
If today feels unproductive, you don't quit. You iterate the ask and you take the next shot anyway.
This has been a deeply practical journey, running all the way from a roadside chicken stand built on desperation to the rigorous iteration loops of modern tech giants.
Let's recap the core insight for you, focusing on the 5 structural safeguards we've identified. Wait, it was 6, wasn't it?
6 principles, yeah. They're all about these structural safeguards. When your internal resources, your mood, your energy, your confidence, when they're depleted, you have to lean on external constraints and concrete measurement to force motion.
Okay, first, the Sanders principle. When you can't be brilliant, be bold enough to ask. Move from safe internal work to exposed external work and track your rejection quota. Make the attempt the win.
Second, the Hank principle. Keep the system breathing. Define your sight-up metric, that non-negotiable baseline, and ritualize a daily stabilization sprint focused on critical foundation work.
Third, the Angelou principle. Keep the appointment. Replace that internal debate with a rigid place and time contract. Create a second place and use a breadcrumb to lower tomorrow's friction.
Fourth, the trollop principle. Collect good quarters. Cure vagueness by running the clock against your output, setting an embarrassingly doable quota, and accumulating frequent small wins as evidence of progress.
Fifth, the Swinburne principle. Don't get inspired, get proof. When your confidence is low, shrink the mission down to a step that can't lie and run a manual-first concierge test to generate objective evidence.
And sixth, the Perkins principle. Iterate the ask. Treat every rejection or failure not as a threat to your ego, but as mandatory feedback that requires you to refine the system before the next attempt.
All 6 of these stories, the Colonel's $105 check, Hankey's site uptime focus, Angelou's calloused elbow, Trollop's mechanical word count, Swinburne's running shoes around the store, Perkins's 100 rejections, they all show that success requires hard work aimed at the business's oxygen supply and system integrity.
Not just waiting for inspiration to arrive.
And this brings us back to that famous maxim from Peter F. Drucker. Plans are only good intentions unless they immediately degenerate into hard work.
The real test of your system isn't how beautiful your plan is or how strategic you felt writing it on a good day.
The real test of that system is what you choose to do. Which system you choose to engage on the day you feel least capable of doing anything at all.
That is where the work that matters actually happens.
You now have 6 distinct, proven methods to convert a day you feel incapable of working into a day of forward motion.
So the provocative thought we'll leave you with is this. If your only work tomorrow is the work you must do, what single external ask are you currently avoiding that, if you just sent it, would force your entire system into motion? You don't need a good mood to press send. Go chase the attempt quota.